Hey everybody, this is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and it is Monday, which means it is time for the Hammerhead Show with my good friend Rob Shue, who's also on YouTube under the same title. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing very well. We are getting closer to training camp. I can almost taste those practices, and I need it, Jack. I need it.
We are right there. The team will report at the camp a week from tomorrow. The first practice coming up a week from Wednesday, so we're right around the corner with this thing. Really quick, before we get started with the show, just want to shout out a few folks in the comment section. We have Raphael 5629ers, who is a member of the Toolbox. He says, "What's up, Jack, Rob, and everyone? Good to have you on board, Raphael." And then right behind him, we have Dan Rostek, who's also a member of the Toolbox. Says, "Hey, faithful, good to have you on board as well, Dan." And we also have Alan, who was in, I know he follows both of us on here. And he says, "Hello, Jack, Rob, and the faithful. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Deebo that like button. Yes, please do that. That'd be fantastic." And then look at that popping in. Everybody's favorite special teams guru, the Toolbox member himself, Brian Culp, says, "What's up, everyone? Good to have you on board as well, Brian." It's been one of the nice pieces about this weekend. It was actually relatively quiet for a change around the 49ers. No big hubbub about anything really until today. I guess you could say. Some folks got a little up in arms. The Madden ratings are coming out and being known as far as all the different positions. And in particular, one 49er didn't make the top 10. Deebo Samuel. The Madden rating folks over at EA Sports don't think as much about Deebo Samuel as a lot of around the 49ers and quite frankly even myself. What do you make of this whole Deebo Samuel not in the top 10 of wide receivers?
I mean, first and foremost, it's got to lower the target for the 49ers and what they're going to pay him, right? I mean, clearly Madden ratings are a prime indicator of what your contract should be. Negotiations, are headed in the 49ers' favors because of this. No, it's a video game, and certainly you can laugh at it because of that. It's not something that is graded by other NFL players, NFL executives. It is the folks at EA Sports. And I think that there is something to it. So on the one level, sort of ridiculous. I think that he doesn't belong that low on the list. I believe he was actually ranked as the 13th best wide receiver according to those rankings. I would staunchly disagree with that. On another level, I kind of like it because it adds some level of additional motivation above and beyond. This falls into that category of that pettiness stuff that players really want to go their way. It's bragging rights. And now Deebo's going to be a little bit more fired up going into this season. So I will take that added motivation.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I get the motivation part. I don't buy make a whole lot out of this. I don't even play Madden, and my kids play it more. Nowadays, it's my kids that are doing it. Every once in a while, I'll get on there and try to play them, and they usually beat me now. But now they've gotten older and they know how to use the controls, right? But here's the reason why I don't think it should be made quite as big of a deal. I think he's a top 10 receiver, but
yeah,
why I don't think it's maybe as big of a slight as some people would seem to believe or make it out to be today from what I see on Twitter at least. Jamar Chase from the Cincinnati Bengals, who was just an amazing rookie wide receiver, he's not even in the top 10 either. And I think he deserves to be right in that same ballpark as Deebo Samuel. So, top 10, top 15, whatever. It's cool. I don't like you said, I don't really play the game. So I don't think Deebo being ranked 9th, 13th would hurt me anyway if I did try to throw him the ball in the game.
I see it as when I go through the list, right? I don't have a problem with Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins all being above Deebo. It's sort of that next group where I would start to debate whether Deebo belongs in that mix. Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Mike Evans. It's in that 5, 6, 7 where I think the conversation becomes interesting. I would argue that it seems clear to me I'd put him above Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, and Amari Cooper. Some of those you could argue for longevity, right? So you have to firmly establish, well, what are the parameters we're using to judge top 10 wide receivers? Does it have something to do with ability to do it over the long term? If so, you could make a stronger argument for some of these guys above Deebo Samuel. But if we're talking about ability, what they've flashed, top end potential, I definitely see Deebo in that 5, 6, 7 conversation.
Yeah, he would be in that range, but I think you're right. I think you hit on a good point right there that it's not most of those guys that are ranked above him have been doing it for a longer period of time. I think if Deebo Samuel goes out and has another season in 2022 like he had in 21, you put that up with 2019 season, and I think then you start to project him further out. It's just a matter of the 49ers need to keep throwing him the ball. If they just kept throwing him the ball like they were in the first half of the year, I think this conversation is even a little bit different. Because I think just based on the numbers, he would have been around 1,700 yards on the season, which it would have been, one of the best in the league, not the best, but one of the best, and put him in a different level. And I think what happened is those targets going away, the pass is not coming in his direction, and he was so electric as a running back. I think some people kind of shied away from how good he was as a receiver in the first half of the year.
Yeah, and if you look at Trent Williams finally getting the recognition that he deserves in that game, it typically does take them a little while to catch up. So I think you're right. If Deebo comes out in 2022 and again has a monster season, you'll probably see that reflected in the rankings in Madden next year.
Yeah, and that getting caught up, that's usually what happens like when you're talking about all pro teams and Pro Bowls and stuff like that, which makes it interesting because Samuel was an all pro this year. But I don't think they were necessarily giving it to him as a wide receiver. They were thinking his overall play. But I mean, you look at all pro, that means you're one of the top two at the position, right? So kind of just an interesting little aside to the way that this whole Deebo Samuel saga has gone is now he's not even in the top 10 in Madden. Even they're disrespecting him.
Yes. And I guess that there'll be some DBs out there that are of the trash talking variety that will probably bring this up. I'm sure Deebo will respond with whatever, contract he comes up with from the 49ers and saying, hey, I got mine. I got my money. But this is the type of thing that maybe you see a Jalen Ramsey talking a little bit of trash, saying he's not top 10. And again, I'm here for that added motivation. Whatever puts a bigger chip on Deebo Samuel's shoulder, I'll take it.
Absolutely, got to keep these guys motivated. As if having a job in the NFL isn't enough, we got to give them a little bit of extra motivation every once in a while.
That's right.
Kind of bouncing off of that, because I think both of us kind of look at that and we're kind of thinking, it's not too big of an issue. So really, the bulk of the show, I know we talked a little bit about this. We want to do something a little different, a little bit lighter with the the fact that there's not a whole lot of news going on, and do an over/under segment. Really go through. Mostly the offensive players, with a couple of defensive players added in here as well. But it's going to be either over or under some threshold, and we'll go through that. And we're going to start off with Deebo Samuel, since that was the topic that we started out with. Deebo Samuel over under 5.5 receiving touchdowns. I went with 5.5 because he's only been over that one time in his career. Last year he had 6, and that's it. So that's why I went with 5.5. So if you had to place a bet over under on Deebo Samuel, would you go over this or under?
This one's tough. I mean, I went back and looked at those receiving touchdown totals as well. Past years, started out with 3, then 1 in the injury plagued year, and 6 last year. I do expect fewer rushes in 2022, but not by a whole lot. I will say that the concern for me is on the offense, there are more mouths to feed. It could be a more explosive offense because of Trey Lance and his skill set coming in, but with greater mouths to feed, I expect more passing touchdowns overall this year. So that balances out a little bit. I say for Deebo Samuel, I don't have him winning the receiving yard total for the 49ers. I don't think he leads. I will get to who I do believe leads that in a little bit. But I say that he does hit that 6 total again. I'm taking the over here. I don't think it's by much. I'm saying Deebo hits 6 receiving touchdowns this year.
Okay. And I'm going to go over on this as well. I know he had 6 last year. I don't see I think his targets are going to be roughly around the same as they were last year. He had a lot early in the year, but so I think that kind of gets a little bit more leveled out. But I think at the end of the year, when it's all said and done, he's going to be right around that same total of what was it, 104, like about 144 or something, right in that ballpark. I think he had last year. So I'd expect to see that again. Excuse me, it was 121. For the regular season last year. So I'd expect to kind of see that number around Deebo Samuel again this season, spread out over 17 games. And I think it's going to be higher. I think 6 is 5.5. I think he's going to be better than he was last year at 6. And I think some of that's going to come from getting some more targets in the red zone. I think with the quarterback that they have, transitioning over to Trey Lance, I think you're going to see him get a few more targets in that red zone area, which is going to help kick up those numbers because just kind of an interesting fact. When you go through the top 49ers receivers, Brandon Aiyuk, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, and then the tight end, George Kittle, that foursome combined for 37 targets last season in the red zone. Only 37, 37 or 36. It might have been 36 even. And you had the guy down in Cooper Kupp down in Los Angeles with the Rams. He had 37 on his own. So, you know, he had one guy. That just shows you the difference in the philosophy. And I think some of that was the quarterback not being very good in the red zone area. So going over there, and then we're gonna stay with the wide receivers on for our next one. And we're going to go this time with Brandon Aiyuk, and we're going to go with 4.5 receiving TDs. Over under on this one. What do you think?
So Brandon is 2 for 2 so far in hitting that over, right? Hit 5 and 5 the past 2 years. I now see this as the interesting relationship to monitor, because it sure seems like he and Trey Lance are now besties, right? Like best buds, training together. Brandon Aiyuk, Trey Lance, there's going to be some type of a connection. Now, I know early on in some of the practices that were available to the media, you indicated that you hadn't seen necessarily what you wanted to from Brandon Aiyuk. I'll let you expand upon that or correct me if I'm misstating that. But I have Brandon Aiyuk leading this team in receiving yards by the end of this year. I don't think he's going to lead in targets or receptions, but I do have him leading in receiving yards. I think he eclipses Deebo's receiving total, and I am going to say that Brandon Aiyuk smashes the over on this one. I think that he has more than the 6 receiving touchdowns I'm predicting for Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, that was funny. I saw somebody tweet that out on Saturday as I was driving to the beach, and I was like, "Oh, look at that! Somebody picked up something that I had written about it almost 2 months ago, and tweeted it out and put it into it." And that was NBC Sports with the Roto World stuff. So that was pretty cool. It was one of those, "Hey, mom, I made it" moments, you know. But yeah, you know, it wasn't. Aiyuk's performance during the OTAs and minicamp wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I just thought it was going to be more explosive. I thought we were going to see him. The connection makes some more plays, and I think that's a little bit of a mix of both of those guys. I do see this being an over, though. I do see Aiyuk having more than 4.5 receiving touchdowns. I think he's probably going to be in that 5 to 6 range again this season. I think Juwan Jennings is the receiver really to keep an eye on and see what he does, because even with his lower number of targets, he was the guy that was making the plays in the red zone. In some ways, Juwan Jennings was he's an interesting person to watch, because he has the size to play. The 49ers have been looking to have like a different move tight end, like a big body. It's almost like a receiver, right? They did it in 2020. Can't remember his name right now, but he wasn't very good. He was dropping the ball over the place and always throwing fits at the end when he come off the sidelines. And then last year they just couldn't find anybody to do it, and so it started to become more of Jennings towards the second half of the year, and also Kyle Juszczyk were their number 2 wide receiver tight ends. I think Jennings can be that guy this year. So if Aiyuk or Samuel don't reach their over that we're talking about here, I think it's because those catches have gone to Juwan Jennings in the red zone. And there was a really good combination between Jennings and Trey Lance during OTAs and minicamp. They really were connecting in that area. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I think that one's a fascinating one to watch, because it's twofold, right? Jennings is a bigger bodied wide receiver, was called out for being the wide receiver best able to create separation quickly, and also had sort of a statistical anomaly last year. So part of me says, well, there's no way he can keep up that statistical anomaly. The percentage of passes that either went for touchdowns or first downs on third down were absurd. And it's unlikely someone's able to continue that trend. But when you look at the other factors of being the big-bodied wide receiver, Kyle Shanahan liking to have someone like that in the offense, specifically for the red zone, and his ability to create separation, like one of those two things has to give, and I'll be fascinated to see which it is.
Yeah, and we know that they like to work their slot receivers anyway, so to have a bigger guy be able to do that, and the the thing that's so good about Jennings and that I've noticed when you compare him to what they tried to get out of Trent Taylor earlier on is this is a guy who just runs really good routes. He gets to his depth. He makes good cuts out at the top of the route. He's really good at the break point. And you saw that play out against the Rams a couple of times in the fourth quarter of that game. We saw it of the Week 18 game. We also saw his toughness in the fourth quarter of the or third quarter, excuse me, of the NFC Championship game with that one catch over the middle, and he fights through some guys for a first down. That was, I don't know if you remember that, but it was going right towards your side of the field where you were sitting. And he caught that ball over the middle from Garoppolo and had to fight through a couple of guys on third down. I think it was 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 11 for a first down.
Right.
So Jennings is the guy I'm really looking forward to seeing if he can bust out this year and how he can kind of screw up the rest of the numbers for the wide receiver group.
And you'd think he'd get that opportunity by how well he is liked by the coaching staff, right? You look at being in the doghouse as something that can happen within Kyle Shanahan's offense. It seems every opportunity they get to talk up Jauan Jennings, to talk up the effort that he gives out on the field, including in the run blocking scheme. I would think that he'll get a lot of opportunities early to take advantage of that and grab that third wide receiver role and really run with it.
Yeah, I agree. Same here. I think they're going to give him a lot of opportunities. He's going to fit in really well there. Really quick, I just want to pull this up from the there. We got quite a back and forth going on in the comment section regarding Deebo Samuel and what the 49ers are going to do with him. We have a couple folks who are saying that they should franchise tag him and whatnot. So USMC 49er says you can't tag him until next year, correct? That's right. Deebo Samuel still has one more season under a contract. So if there's going to be a franchise tag applied to him, it's not going to be until the 2023 season. So if the 49ers don't give him a new deal, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think he's going to get a new deal. What about you?
I definitely believe he is going to get a new deal. That, to me, would be a nightmare scenario where you kept Deebo around and you allow him to play out on his 4th year of the deal. I just can't imagine that Deebo would be happy. I think it would cause commotion within the locker room. It would certainly be a topic of conversation for all the national media and a distraction throughout training camp and early into the season. I just don't think that you want that type of a distraction when you would rather the storyline be handing over the reins to Trey Lance and getting things to a sunny place with nothing but positive news.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, really, this is a guy who I think you pay him. I think he's going to be really good for years to come. And if they just get him through another 4 years, I think that'd be fantastic for the 49ers. So we'll see. And as Blind Tom says, he's a member of the Toolbox. He says, just pay the guy already. So I agree with you, Blind Tom. Let's get him paid. Hey, if you follow the Instagram and Twitter stuff, apparently he was in the San Francisco airport recently. So maybe he's reporting a couple days early to get that contract signed. Who knows?
That is a week early. I mean, that gives me some hope that we'll see something come along the NFL ticker soon.
Yeah, hopefully they get that thing wrapped up. It'll be good news for him, be good news for the 49ers, I think. And really quick before we go on to the next topic, Raphael 5629ers is always so good about reminding me to tell everybody to like and subscribe if you could, please. He's a member of the Toolbox there, and he always keeps me on my toes when it comes to that. Well, let's stay on the offense and stay with the passing game, but we're going to get off the receivers now, and we're going to go to everybody's favorite position, the quarterback. And we're going to go with Trey Lance. And I put the over-under for Lance at 3,500 passing yards. I'll let you hit on this one first, and then I'll go next.
Yeah, I went through and tried to make a prediction about Trey Lance earlier on this offseason. And as I was examining that, I don't think that Lance lights up the world on his first full season, but I have some confidence in his ability to operate within this offense. And I believe that Kyle Shanahan is going to attempt to run what we saw last year, just with a more skilled quarterback. I'm not anticipating some major shift in the system, and therefore I think the opportunities will be there for Lance to have a solid season. I look at this one as being close to 3,500 yards. I wouldn't be shocked if it were right around there. But because I have already looked at this and because I believe Lance is going to have a good season, I put him right at about 3,600 passing yards. So I'm taking the over on this one for Trey Lance. Okay, so you went just barely over then. Just barely. Barely.
Okay. And I'm looking at it, and I've seen all kinds of numbers with him, and I've seen people say, a 3,100 passing yard year would be good for him. I don't know. I don't see that at all. I see this as a team that doesn't like to, they're not going to come out and be just like bombs away team. It's not like he's going to come out and throw the ball 650 times like some other quarterbacks are doing. But I do see what they did last year kind of being their sweet spot. About 500 passing attempts, 512 was what they did over a 17 games schedule. And really with what he did last year, I think it's, when you look at what he did and when you compare it with what Jimmy Garoppolo as a team last year, the 49ers threw for 4,400 yards in the regular season. So I look at this and I think that Trey Lance is going to finish around 4,300 on his own if he plays the full season. And so for me, it's way over it. It's not even close. And the only reason I even went with the 3,500 is because I've seen such a range amongst folks, and I wasn't quite sure where you were, so that's why I even put it at 35. Otherwise, I would have put it closer to 4, because I think he's going to go over 4 if he just has, 4,000 yards with the way that the NFL is now with 17 games. That's not even 200. I think it's right around 250, under 250 yards per game or something like that.
I mean, that is powerful to bring in the addition of the 17th game, and even with Jimmy missing a couple, him racking up 3,800 yards last year. I did look at, historically speaking, he often gets compared to Josh Allen. It took Josh Allen until his 3rd season to surpass that. And you never know whether there is going to be an issue for Trey Lance. It felt to me to be right around that 3,500 range. But as you break out the math and as you point out the 17-game season, I guess I'm not going to be shocked if I'm way off on that. I'm not going to be shocked if Trey Lance does eclipse the 4,000-yard mark. But if I were putting money on it, I would be closer to the 3,600 range.
Yeah, so let's just look at it real quick, just to go off of his two starts. He threw the ball. He averaged 26 in his 2 starts, 29 and 23. So that's 26. So if you do that times 17. Everybody loves math. I know that. It's at 442, so that's a little bit lower than where they were last year, but I think that still puts them right in that 3,900-yard range, even at that. So I think if he plays a full 17 games, he's going to be right around 4,000, maybe just a little bit under it or a little bit over it. We'll see how it plays out for him.
That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. He's gonna have a good year, and I'm gonna go back real quick. This goes back to our previous topic in terms of the Deebo Samuel situation, but I want to pull this one up from Dan. Dan says, would a Jimmy trade and a Deebo extension on the same day be the greatest day in Niners history?
I will say, I was going to point out that there are 2 huge sighs of relief that I will just let out with an enthusiastic sigh, and it would be Jimmy G and news of his trade and a Deebo Samuel extension. It would be, I have to say, the greatest day of this offseason if we got both of those things done in one day. It would feel like a huge wave of relief washing over me.
Those are the 2 topics that, for the most part, two of the 3 topics that we've heard all offseason, right?
Yes.
We've heard about Deebo Samuel getting extended, Jimmy Garoppolo, what's going to happen with him, and then obviously Trey Lance, is he ready? Is he not ready? Is his arm fatigued or not? All those kind of things. So I think this is a situation that's going to, if they can get this done in the same day, that would be fantastic for everybody involved. That'd be a good day, easy day for me to be able to write a couple stories. That's for sure.
We just need that in combination with a headline on ESPN that says Trey Lance to be the unquestioned starter of San Francisco, 0 doubts, right? That would then we'd have the trifecta if we could kill all 3 storylines on one day.
Absolutely. Well, and then here's another one too. With Blind Tom, thank you very much for the super chat. He says Cowherd sang the praises of Jimmy today, very persuasive. It's 103 at my house 3 days in a row. Thanks, guys. Hey, 103. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's 105 here today. Oof. And Cowherd definitely is singing the praises of Jimmy the last couple of weeks. He did this last week with Mike Silver, which got everybody in an uproar, and now we have this. So. Maybe there's somebody over in the Garoppolo camp that's getting his ear.
Hey, I'll take it. Keep talking them up. Get that trade market going, Colin.
Exactly. That's exactly. If foreigners can find a way to get him off their hands with the trade, that'd be perfect for them. So
yes, it would.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm not sure. Trey Lance, I appreciate it very much, Blind Tom, for the super chat. And as Dan Rostek says, there's Don Yee working overtime. I think I do think that's correct too.
He's hustling.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's trying to get that money, right? We're going to stick on Trey Lance for a couple more. Over under, and this time we're going to get away from his passing for a minute, and we're going to go to his rushing yards. Over Trey Lance, 500 rushing yards. Over under. What do you think?
All right, this one was a tough one in my book. So I went back and, again, looking at history here. So in 2021, only the top 3 rushing quarterbacks surpassed 500 yards: Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. I'm just not sure Lance is yet the rushing force that any of those 3 are. I go back to 2020. It was only 4 of them. Again, Lamar Jackson. This time, Kyler Murray, Cam Newton, Russell Wilson. 2019, only 3 of them: Lamar, Kyler, Josh Allen. Some common names throughout those lists, right? But Josh Allen is the one that people tend to compare Lance to, and he hit 631 in 2018, his rookie year. So it wasn't as if it took him multiple years to get there. He actually ran more earlier on in his career. I'm just not convinced that that's the way in which Kyle Shanahan is going to want to use Lance, in particular after allowing him sort of a redshirt season for his rookie year. It is one where Josh Allen, again, the guy that we're comparing him to most in running style, is on the list 3 out of those 4 years where I looked at it. But I'm just not seeing Lance as developed as a rusher as those guys I mentioned just yet. I see him as going under on this one, but not by much. I think he'll be just like a lot of these guys I saw on the list, where they're in between 450 and 500, just under the 500 club, but not by a whole lot.
Yeah, and for me, I'm going to go slightly over. I put a prediction out earlier. I had him at around 510 rushing yards, and the reason that if I remember when I put that together, I don't think that 500 rushing yards is going to come from necessarily designed runs.
Right.
Trey Lance was very good. When you look at Trey Lance last year, when you break it up, and you can do it pretty easily because there's not a ton of carries for him, but his big runs last year were off of scrambles, and so I think that's where I want to see that be where if he's going to be running a lot or he's going to be picking up 500 yards rushing, I want that to come from the scramble portion of it. I think that's what we're going to see. He's going to have some issues a little bit early on in terms of his vision. I think we saw that a little bit with him last year at times. I don't think it'd be out of the question for him to kind of be dealing with that again at the start of this season. So for me, I think he's going to be right around 500. If you take his numbers from last year, it averages out to about 102 carries for 510 yards. So I think he's going to get there. I think it's primarily going to be from scrambles, though, not designed runs. That's where he's best.
Yeah, when I saw him last year, I thought that as far as the speed that he had, that the angles that he took, and the vision were not quite where I wanted them to be. That all could have been a result of the game still moving a bit too fast for him. I would anticipate fewer games like the one against Arizona, and I agree he'll get a lot of those yards from scrambling on plays that break down or opportunities that come up as opposed to designed runs. But until I see him getting the edge a little bit quicker, being a little more decisive in the angles that he takes, I'm going to be skeptical of the ability to crack that 500 mark.
Yeah, and I understand that. I agree with you, too, when it comes to his running. It just doesn't seem like the speed is quite there when it's on those designed runs. It definitely seems like there's more of an explosion and burst when he's doing it off of the scramble than when he's doing it out of like a read option or zone read kind of thing where he's taking it around the edge. It doesn't seem like he has that speed like you would expect it from somebody that's as fast as him. So that's why I go back to this being if he's going to get over 500 or close to it, it's going to be because of scrambling, not designed runs.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Yes. Let's one last one here when it comes to Trey Lance, and we're going to go with passing touchdowns. Trey Lance over under 26.5 passing TDs.
All right. Again, I'm looking back at comps here. So it took Josh Allen 3 years into his career to eclipse that number. But I do think that Trey will be a more polished passer early on in his career, as opposed to the way in which it took Josh Allen a while to really turn it on there. Of the rookies that started at quarterback last year, the only one that really came close out of the first round was Mac Jones with 22 touchdowns. Jimmy only had 20 touchdowns last season and only eclipsed 26 once in his most stellar year of 2019. So this one for me, just looking at the statistical data, the historical statistical data, I got to take the under on this one for Lance. I think he's definitely over in total touchdowns. I believe he picks up several rushing touchdowns. I think he's going to be a red zone threat. But as far as passing touchdowns, I'm going over on 26 and a half. Sorry, under on 26 and a half.
Okay, so we're going under on 26 and a half there. And that makes sense. And when you go back and just take Trey Lance out of it, take other quarterbacks from other teams out of it, just look at the 49ers over the last 4 years. They've combined for 26, 25, a high of 28, and then 26. So they've only been over 26 one time in the last 4 years. 2 of those years, one of them was in the Super Bowl. The other time was the NFC Championship game. And so what that shows me is if the team's winning, they're usually not going to be throwing a whole lot of touchdowns. But I'm going with the over here. I think he's going to get to 28. That was the number that I predicted for him in my write-up earlier in the offseason. I think that's a number that would make sense just based off of the numbers that they put up last year. The 28, 26. I know he had 6 of those or 5 of those, excuse me, in 2.5 quarters primarily. So I think this for him to get to 28 at 27, I think he can get there over a 17-game schedule. Again, I'm basing it off of him playing 17 weeks.
Right.
Because if he can play all 17 weeks, I think he gets over that 26 and a half number.
Yeah, and if he ends up missing those, average 2 games, as most players do within the NFL, could be slightly under that. That's why I like these selections of where you put these lines, that a couple of factors here or there could make the difference between Trey's ability to hit these, Deebo's ability to hit these stats. It really comes down to, can they play the full 17 games, and will they be as statistically consistent as they were in years prior?
Yeah, and with Lance, we don't have those prior years, so it's really just about the team. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this offense and how they're able to, if they're able to be as consistent, I guess, for lack of a better term, over the course of the season, because they've been relatively consistent over the last 3, or at least in 19 and 21, you pretty much knew what you were getting out of them.
Absolutely.
Let's kick it over to the defensive side. And this one was a little bit hard for me to come up with a number because it's just been all over. He's kind of been all over the board, but we're going to go to Nick Bosa. And I put Nick Bosa at 12 and a half sacks. I came up with this number just looking at it. He had 15 and a half sacks last year. His rookie season, he was at 9. So I kind of took the middle of that at 12 and a half to let and I went with the half because then we got to go with 13 or 12. So what do you think? Over, under 12 and a half for the big bear or the little bear?
This is tough, right? Coming off of that, as you said, 15 and a half sack season, but in his 2 prior years, obviously 2020 basically erased due to injury, but in the 2 prior seasons did not eclipse that 12 and a half sack total. Seems to have more help this year. I like the depth at the edge position. Will that take away sacks from Bosa or limit the number of double teams that opposing offenses are able to place on Bosa, thus, providing him more opportunities? It's tough one way or the other. He seems to only get better each year, just getting a little bit leaner. He's a master tactician. I see this one as Bosa staying healthy for the year and surpassing the 12 and a half sacks by a wide margin. I have predicted this 49er team to lead the NFL in total sacks. I believe the prediction I threw out there was 57 total for the team. I'm putting Bosa close to, if not surpassing the 20 mark in this year's sack total. I think he has a monster year.
Holy moly, over 12. Wow, that's a big number. And Dan agrees with you in terms of the over. He says there's no recovery from injury this year. I'm gonna disagree with you both. I'm going under with the 12 and a half sacks. And, you were talking about trends and historical trends earlier when we were doing the piece on Trey Lance. If we go back and we do that with Nick Bosa has never had back-to-back big seasons, even during his time at Ohio State. It was always he had a good year, down year, good year. I think it was actually a kind of a middle of the road year, a really good second season, and then his third year he was hurt. And then he came to the 49ers, had a really good rookie season, injured, really good second season. So I'm going to go with it not being quite as good this year. And I'm not going to say he's going to get injured. I just don't think he's going to hit 12 and a half sacks.
Right. And you could still have a decent season while not racking up 12 and a half sacks.
You sure could, especially with this defensive line that they have, right? We've talked all offseason about this defensive line being extremely deep and how tough it's going to be for them to get it, to make those final cuts. They get down to 10 or 11 defensive linemen with how solid that group is. I could see him finishing at, say, 10 and a half. Eric Armstead, 7 or 8. Samson Ebukam, his numbers going up. Kamoko Toure, just that number as a team being around the same as they were a year ago, but it being a little bit more spread out across the board.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm going to say 10 and a half. You've got them at close to 20. So we got a big divide between us. So
that's a big delta on that one.
There is. So we'll see how that works. And then Lee thinks that Bosa, he says, Bosa, all the sacks, Bosa contract year.
That man's going to earn his money.
That could be it too. Cause he's, if without getting that contract done and he knows he's playing for the contract, he knows the big money that's out there. That could be all the motivation he needs. You're talking about that earlier with Jimmy Ward.
And a good point by Dan right after that as well. The idea of a better secondary being out there, giving just a little bit of additional time, and the fact that Nick Bosa is not a huge speedster. So a couple additional tenths of a second could be all he needs to get to the quarterback and continue racking up those sacks.
Yeah, and we really saw that as the season went on. When the secondary got a little bit better, you saw a couple of times where he was able to get some sacks where just if you just get the quarterback to have to hitch or just kind of maybe pat the ball one more time, they're going to get there. And I agree with that. I think the secondary is going to be better, which is going to allow for more sacks or more. I don't know if it's going to result in more sacks, but I think you're going to see quarterbacks getting hit more.
Right.
Which is going to lead to some more turnovers for the defense and those types of things as well. So 420 Savage, he's right. He's a little bit of, right around you. He says 16 or 17 sacks is realistic. If he plays all 17, over 20 sacks, yes. So he agrees with you on that one.
We're feeling a Bosa season here.
There you go. And then the last one, still sticking on the defensive side, and we're going to go with second to last one, Jimmy Ward. I have Jimmy Ward at over under, and I put 1.5 interceptions.
This is tough because immediately I was like, well, 1.5. Yeah, of course, Jimmy's going to get more than 1.5. Jimmy's only surpassed 1.5 interceptions once in his career, right? Last year. And they both came in one game against the Rams. He only has 4 picks his entire 7-year career. I love Jimmy Ward. I think that he is an underrated player. I respect his game. I know it's a contract year for him. I got to go with the law of averages on this one. And I'm sorry, Jimmy, but I have to take the under here because whether it is scheme or inability on Jimmy's part, the interceptions just have not been there. It would be a statistical anomaly for him to be able to pull down 2 or more this year. I hope that he does. I hope that he earns himself a huge bag. But if I'm laying money down on this, I'm taking the under.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think if you're putting money on it, and you say it's the under because there's nothing to tell you that it's going to be the over, right? He's only done it once. He did have 3. I think he had 3 total last year. If you include the one in the playoff game down in Los Angeles, he had that third. But okay, so that's still he had 3 interceptions, 2 of them in one game, and the third one coming against the same opponent in the playoffs, right? So he had 3 interceptions last year, all against Matt Stafford. I'm going to go with the under here as well. The one thing I will say as far as why he might go over is that this is a guy who has talked about wanting to go into this offseason as a free agent to maximize his money. He's talked about wanting to finally get to reach the Pro Bowl. all pro level, those types of things. And he's also mentioned that in order to get there, it's going to have to come with turnover. So I think he knows that if he's at 100, 1 or 2 interceptions, those numbers aren't going to be there. So maybe Jimmy Ward has some extra motivation himself to get that number above it.
He does. I mean, he's saying he's going to F your favorite player up in the process. So like he's talking that trash. He's coming out with the fire. And again, I will be absolutely pulling for Jimmy in his ability to do this. Wouldn't be shocked if he was able to pull it out, considering it is a contract year. But again, in looking back at historical trends, just had to go against it.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that Ward is a very solid player. So you look at this, you might say, that's a slight at him. But, some of it is also the way that they've asked him to play. And it's
right.
Usually, he's not usually around the line of scrimmage. He's more of a deep guy. And if the ball's not getting tipped around, it's kind of hard to be making those plays. That's, 2 of those picks that he had last year were off balls that were tipped. One of them he was in coverage on the tight end and it got tipped out of, he dropped it and bounced out of his hands and he picked it off and ran it back for a touchdown. And then against the Rams in the championship game, there was a tip that he was able to take. So it just depends on if they have him playing around the line of scrimmage a little bit more this year, that's where I could see that switching from the under to the over.
And it is just about skill sets. I saw the NFL exec that was quoted as saying that Jimmy Ward is one of the best cover safeties within the league. And that is how I view Jimmy Ward as well. And that's a different skill set and an equally, you might argue, equally important one because he allows that 49ers defense to do specific things schematically when they can take away a tight end or whomever they put Jimmy on man to man.
Yeah, and that's a when you talk about that coverage, he is very good when he gets down there in the box and he starts to take away either a wide receiver or sometimes your tight end running back through the way. He's very solid down there. So I agree with that from a man coverage perspective. He's probably one of the best, if not the best, safety at doing that. Makes sense. He's spent time in the league as a cornerback and as a nickel. So all that diversity that he's had to do throughout his time with the 49ers is really starting to pay off for the current iteration of the 49ers. And then let's wrap it up. So we've done all the players and now it's time to get to the team. And I put the over under for the 49ers at 9.5 wins. That's the total at Vegas, I think, is 9.5. And so that's why I went with this one. What are your thoughts? Over under 49ers, 9.5 wins.
We've gone through this exercise. We did it way too early, and we'll need to go through this exercise again as we get more information that comes out in training camp, as injuries happen across the league, and that changes our predictions as far as what teams the 49ers come up against and whether they will be more ferocious than we had initially anticipated or less so. But I felt very confident in going through there that I had a conservative outlook. I do think it's going to look rough through the first half of the year. It's entirely possible that we go into the bye coming out real close to, if not at 500. And I know that will cause some panic, but I see a strong trend down the stretch. The 49ers potentially, I'm predicting, winning their final 4, and I have them ending up at 11 wins. And again, I saw that as a conservative estimate, getting them to 11 wins. I believe I had 3 2-game losing streaks in there. And for all of those to come to fruition, it feels like a stretch. I would not be surprised by 12 or 13 wins. Wouldn't be shocked by 10 either, but 9 wins or fewer, I would be. So I feel very confident in this one, taking the over.
Yeah, I feel confident in taking the over on this one as well. You look at, for me, I think my schedule, when I look at it, is a little bit different than you. I think the 49ers have a relatively easier start to the season. They should win their first 2 games.
Right.
At Chicago, home against Seattle. Those are games that they should win, but Seattle always gets some fits for whatever reason.
They do.
And then the tough games in there, they'll be Denver and the Rams. I really think the 49ers should be 4-2 after the first 6 weeks of the season. And then from there, if you're looking at 10 wins, then you're looking at 6 wins over the last 12 or 11 games. And I think that they can do that. They don't have to travel east of the Mississippi after week 6. The farthest they travel after that is down to Mexico City. Everything else is on the West Coast. Easy travel schedule, a lot of home games. I think the 49ers if everybody stays healthy, the quarterback plays the way that you expect him to play, least the way that I expect them to play, I think this is a team that can win 13 games. So I think they can blow that 9.5 win number out of the water. Definitely an over for me. If they're at 9 or below, that's going to be a really frustrating season for the 49ers, in my opinion.
Yeah, that will come with some very skeptical storylines. I mean, maybe not from the national media, but I could see certainly the local guys coming up with some bad titles from that because of the expectation that the 49ers should be able to win more than that. I do agree that it's likely the Niners come out 4-2 within those first 6 games. If they do struggle with Seattle, I could see that being a 3-3 start, but I still believe that 4-4 is possible on this schedule. It would be a bit of a nightmare. It would cause a lot of doubt. To me, the key to this season will be the trajectory of Trey Lance. We could end up with 9 wins, and I could be happy with that as long as it's clear progression from Trey from start to finish of the season, as long as there's reason for optimism going into the next season. But if we make it to the playoffs, I'll be satisfied almost no matter what. If we can continue our trend being in the playoffs after what happened last year with a new quarterback, I'd be thrilled.
If they're at 9 wins and they're in the playoffs, and that's one thing. But if they're at 9 wins and they're not in the playoffs, you're talking about them getting some heat and not having it not necessarily be from the national media guys or from the local media guys. I think if they're at 9 wins and they don't make the playoffs or 9 wins or below and they're not in a playoff team, I think the national media guys are the ones that are going to have. You're going to be seeing this every day on Fox. Get Up or whatever the show is on Fox in the morning, on Get Up, on ESPN, all that kind of stuff. They're all going to be ripping the 49ers because they didn't stick with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
I think that's what, if it's all going to be, I told you that Jimmy Garoppolo should have played another. I told you Trey Lance wasn't ready. Told you that the 49ers were nervous, and this is exactly what it is. That's what all the storyline is going to be if the 49ers don't make the playoffs this year with Trey Lance starting.
The I told you so stories would be awful. The irony is if Trey Lance lights it on fire, you won't get those storylines where it's like, yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong about Trey Lance. I came out with that random story with no sources during the offseason on my program, and I was completely wrong about that. You won't hear those national guys admitting mea culpas if Trey Lance does light it up.
Yeah, or if the team's winning and he's just kind of having a middle of the road kind of, it's going to be all about the team, right?
Right.
It's going to go from Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers win because of Jimmy Garoppolo, which you see a lot from the national side too. The 49ers are winning because all of a sudden everybody else on the roster is going to be getting their the positive praise for a change. So it'll be fun to see how this whole thing plays out. Real quick, we do have one more that we have to hit. We can't pass this one because I think it's just perfect with the show today. Dan asks, over under Rita Oak 175 drawings. Remember she's doing a Jimmy Garoppolo drawing every day until he gets traded. She's at today was number 166, and it was a picture of Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo with San Francisco and the Bay Bridge in the background, or the Golden Gate below them. Tradeless in San Francisco. So what do you think there, Rob?
So 9 more days. That would take us. So basically what Dan's asking is, will Jimmy still be on the roster when the Niners start training camp? Because they start on the 26th. That would put us right there at the 27th if Rita's drawn 175. I hate to say it because I want this thing to be over. I gotta take the over on that. I think Rita's going to be drawn somewhere maybe into the late 170s, early 180s. I don't think it's too long after we start training camp that we get Jimmy Garoppolo traded, but I also don't think it's as clean as I want it to be where he's gone before we show up to training camp.
Imagine if she gets up to like 200, 205, which would mean that he's there all throughout training camp, all the way to the start of the regular season. So
nightmare.
Yeah, no, I think it's funny. I think I've been saying all along that I felt like he was going to get traded by the start of training camp. So if I was to be consistent, I'm going to go with the under here. And I will, because I want to be consistent. Just for the sake of being consistent, I will take the under.
I hope you're right, Jack. I hope you're right.
You got to admit though, I've got to admit at least, it doesn't seem like that prediction is going to come true. I think this doesn't seem like anybody wants to make a move for him right now. So, and I don't see the 49ers just releasing him. There's nothing in it for the 49ers right now to just outright release him. They've got their roster in place. They're not going to be adding anybody. There's no trades. There's some guys that they could trade for, but they really don't have even the draft picks that they're going to want to use, I think, to trade for a veteran right now. So I think the roster is pretty well set. And then I don't see them in a rush to get rid of him quite like we are.
I agree. They seem to want to get some value there. They seem to be very stubborn in appearing to win this trade. And certainly a cut or anything where you're trading him away for peanuts feels like a loss, especially after dragging the fan base through all this drama to this point. It would be a much cleaner exit if they're able to get something for him, even if that means keeping him a few weeks into training camp.
Yeah, and it might be something that they carry him all the way through. I think when it was, they've talked a lot about, there's been a lot of talk of the Flyers keeping him in hopes that another team has an injury at quarterback. And if I remember correctly, when the Eagles did that with the Vikings, it was right at the end of training camp. I think it might have been training camp was done and they were getting ready for the season at that point.
Oof.
I don't remember the dates were, but I know it was really late in training camp when Bridgewater went down.
And certainly if you were to cut Jimmy Garoppolo midway through training camp and then a situation like that did happen and someone picked up Jimmy Garoppolo for free instead of giving up where you would assume if they're pressed into that corner in having to reach out, having to make the trade, the Niners would be able to milk them for all they're worth. You would feel foolish if you had just cut Jimmy Garoppolo a week before when there wasn't a hard deadline until closer to the 53-man cutdown.
Yeah, they don't have a hard. That's their deadline really is once they get to the 53-man roster.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing goes because from my understanding, the 49ers can't keep him from practicing unless it's because of an injury. So maybe that could be some of the reason why we haven't heard of him passing a physical at this point. Those kind of things. Maybe it's one of those things where he doesn't pass a physical until a trade's in place. They just make it seem like he's hurt and ride this thing out all year long if they have to.
Yeah, that would make sense because you obviously don't want him playing in preseason games because there is a reasonable likelihood of getting hurt, just like there is in a regular season game. But as far as practicing and whether you can or can't hold him back, I agree. I think my understanding of it is unless it's injury related, you have to allow him to practice. I don't know whether you can minimize the number of reps. I would think that you could because you can dole out reps however you would see fit amongst your quarterbacks. And I would think they would prioritize Trey Lance quite heavily in that regard. But it'll be fascinating to watch, regardless of what is happening. If Jimmy's still on the team on the 26th when those practices start, it's going to be a storyline. We will be covering it, even if it's just to say Jimmy's present, Jimmy's there, Jimmy is on the field.
Yeah. Yep. So it'll definitely be a storyline. Realistically, it's going to be hard for me to see Jimmy Garoppolo show up in Santa Clara. I don't, he's already said his goodbyes. He might not even just show up on his own accord, but we'll see how it plays out. But it's definitely going to be something worth, as you mentioned, something will be worth reporting on the 26th when they have the day. That's when they show up. And then the 27th is when they have that first practice. That's definitely something we're going to be keeping an eye on.
Most definitely. Hey, when we do our show next Monday, we will be so close to it. Maybe we'll have resolution. Just maybe.
Maybe that'd be fantastic, right? Maybe what we could have around like 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock on next Monday. They get Deebo done and Jimmy Garoppolo traded. That'd be perfect. That goes with the comment from earlier today.
Now we're talking, Jack.
Now we're talking. That's right. Real quick, Rob, what have you got coming up on your channel this week?
I will be on tomorrow, the fantastic live 49ers mailbag episode on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. So you can follow me on Twitter at The Left Shoe. I will send out a notification for your 49ers related questions. I will answer those along with any of you that show up live in the chat. I will answer those questions off the cuff as well. If you've got a question on your mind now, you can send it into 49ersmailbag@gmail.com.
Perfect. So if you're watching this and you're not already following Rob, make sure you get over there and you follow his channel as well. Subscribe to that because he does a great job over there. It's always a lot of fun to talk to him and watch his content. I know I do every once in a while when I get a chance. When I'm not doing my own, usually I bump up against you with mine. So just make sure you get over there with Rob, though. Check his stuff out because you do stuff on Wednesdays usually too as well, correct?
I do. I usually have Randon McMahon on Between Two Beards. Got a nice Thursday show for the call-in. And then Fridays, I have this wonderful gentleman with me on my channel.
Perfect. So there you go, everybody. Make sure you're following Rob. And then if you can do me a favor before you head out tonight, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button real quick. Hit that little bell notification so you know when we're going live all the time. And then last but not least, two more things. Hit the like button. The more you like the shows, the better it works with YouTube's with their whole system. Make sure it kind of helps to get it out there in front of more folks. So hit that like button for me, please. And then get to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. You can new articles going up every week starting next week. Today dropped the my 53-man prediction what linebackers are going to make the roster. So check it out. Get over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thank you all so much for being great in the comment section, for the super chats, for just the involvement overall. Really appreciate it. And as you noticed, there's a few folks I mentioned about being Toolbox. And so those are the members of the site. You're a member, your comments get pulled up more often to be talked about. So please join it and let's have a good time. But Rob, thank you so much. It's always a lot of fun to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, Jack. Thanks for having me on, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your Monday. Take care, and we'll be seeing you soon. I'll be back tomorrow night with Sunil for a throwback show. Cheers, guys.